once you've decided which room you're going to measure and build, you're going to need a few items to go ahead and start with those measurements. You can either use a tape measure, that's my suggestion, it's easiest because you're dealing with the long walls, or a meter stick, which we've used in class. First thing you're going to want to do is measure the outside walls. If it's a rectangular room, you only have to do 2 of the walls because the other 2 are going to be the same length. You might need a partner for this, especially if you're using a meter stick, actually, and a tape measure too, because the wall is so long. You're going to start in the one corner. It's easiest if you do it along the floor. However, since I have furniture here, it's a little bit harder for me. I'm going to measure, and I'm going to measure in metric units. So the easiest way is to start out in centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and measure, and I'm going to do it by hundreds. It's easier to count since I'm doing it myself. I have 100. I'm going to put my finger here. I'm going to measure again. 200. And I'm going to go all the way down to the corner of my wall. I also have a piece of paper here with me. When I get down to the corner, I find out it's 404 centimeters. I'm going to draw a rough sketch of that on my paper. So I have my rectangular room drawn out, and I write 404 centimeters. Then I come to my next wall, and again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to measure all the way down, and I find out it's 380 centimeters. So I'm going to write 380 centimeters on my piece of paper. Now I have the outside dimensions of my walls done. Once you've measured the outside dimensions of your walls, you need to pick 5 items in the room that you want to measure. These can be any 5 items. It can be furniture, it can be a picture, or it can even be a window, because some of the rooms you may have a hard time coming up with 5 pieces of furniture. For each of those pieces of furniture, you're going to want to get the length, width, and height. And again, roughly sketch them out on your piece of paper. So for me, the first item I'm going to choose is this table here. I'm going to measure the length, width, and height of it in centimeters again. So I start here with the length, and I have 107 centimeters. I'm going to write that down. The width, which is 68 centimeters. I'm going to write that down. And the height, which is 48 centimeters. And I'm going to write that down. I'm going to do that for each of the 5 items I'm going to measure. Once you have figured out your measurements in centimeters, it's time to convert to meters. Once you have drawn your document on paper, it's time to transfer your design from paper to the computer. To do this, we're going to use an application found in Google Docs. You find it by going to Create, Floor Planner, and waiting for it to load up. You're going to start a new document. When I go into mine is a blank, or mine already has some pictures into it. I've dragged them in just to save time, but yours will be a completely blank document. In order to draw this, we are going to simply transfer the measurements that we have on our paper in meters to this document here. Notice at the bottom here, on the bottom left-hand corner, this document right now is in feet. I'm going to change it to meters because we're talking about the metric system here. The very first thing I'm going to do is draw my room onto the picture. Again, I'm just taking my measurements that I've done at home on the paper and putting them onto the screen here. So the very first thing I'm going to want to do is draw my walls out. I'm going to click on the top right-hand corner. I have 6 options here. I'm going to do the option that says draw a single wall line or dimension, and I'm going to choose the top one by clicking on it until I have a little plus sign here. Notice this plus is going to follow me around wherever I go. I'm going to start up at the top here, And I'm going to draw in my top line, which was 4.04 meters. Now, we're going to try the best we can to get this onto here. My first wall is 4.04 meters. So I click here once, and notice as I'm dragging, it's giving me the measurement. I'm going to want to watch my measurements as closely as possible and come as close to 4.04 meters as I can. Hopefully I'll be able to get it exact, but this is a little bit temperamental. So 4.04, there we go. I got it. And in order to end that line, notice it says double click to finish or cancel this line. So I'm going to double click and it finishes it, and I can move wherever I want. The next wall in my room's just a rectangular shape, comes from here down this way, and it's going to be 3.8 meters. So again, I'm going to draw my wall. I'm going to start here, click, and drag down till I get to 3.8. There we go, and double click. Now I have the outer dimensions of my room put in. Now it's time to pick my 5 pieces of furniture that I chose and drop them into the room too. Now for me, I chose a couch, which notice if I go over here, I can click on the drop down arrow that gives me all these different rooms. If you chose your bedroom, go to bedroom. It's going to give you lots of furniture that may be in there. Hopefully you can find the piece of furniture that you have. If you can't, we can find something else at least close to it. Mine was a living room, so that's why I went to living. And I'm given the option of all these different pieces of furniture that I can use. Sorry, there we go. I've already brought my couch in, which I measured. I brought in my table. I brought in my coffee table. So my 5 pieces of furniture were a couch, a side table, a coffee table. I chose a picture that hangs on the wall over here, and I chose a window. Now, this room does not have too much in the way of furniture. That's why I ended up choosing a window. So for my window, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on window. Notice on the left-hand side, I get all these choices of windows and doors. You're going to want to pick the one that looks most like your window. So I'm going to click on the window and drag it over, and notice it turns to the size I want it to, or turns the direction I need it to be on this wall. So here's my window, and I'm going to drop it in. Now, it's not going to let you change the size of the window. However, when I put my measurements in, my window will be okay there. So I dropped my window in. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you, once I put these dimensions, all of my objects in, I am going to be going back and putting the measurements of all of them in. You can either do it as you're dropping them in, or you can do it later. I'm going to do it later. So I dropped my window in. Now I need to find a picture, and I believe if I just type in picture, nothing comes up. I'm pretty sure I saw in here earlier paintings. There we go. Now mine's not a painting, but again, like I said, you can find something that's close enough to what you have in your actual room. So I'm going to choose this painting. I have a painting on the wall right behind my couch, and I'm going to put it right here. So there's my painting. I dropped that in. The measurements on your furniture, when you click on them, it doesn't actually give you measurements, but like I said, you are going to put your measurements right next to it so that we can see what they should be. And draw your picture in there about to scale. In other words, for my couch, I could fit 2 couches down my wall here. So this is actually looking a little big. I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller, just so that it looks like it's about the size of my room. I wouldn't want a couch in my room that took up the entire room. Same with my table. It's probably a little smaller. I'm going to move it over here, and my end table, or coffee table. Put it right there. Now, in order to label all of these items, I'm going to come back over here to my screen, or to my 6 choices, and I'm going to click on the letter A. Notice it says to place a comment, so I'm going to drag this over to this wall, and I'm going to put in my measurements. Now, we've already talked about the measurements in class. I'm going to put my actual measurements, which in this case, my actual measurement was 4.04 meters. And then I'm going to put my scale measurements in. So my new number becomes 40.4 centimeters. And this is how big I'm going to make this wall when I make my actual 3D model. So that scale measurement that you do is going to be very important because those are the measurements you're going to follow when you're actually building your model. Then I'm going to come over to my window. I'm going to put my measurements of my window in. Now, measurements of my window are a little different because for my window, I can only get a length and a height. The window is actually set into the wall, so I'm not going to do the width of my window. But my actual measurements are going to be length equals 1.72 meters. Oops. And my width equals 1.03 meters. So my scale turns into length, and you can even just do an L for length if you want. Length is 17.2 centimeters, and my width equals 10.3 centimeters. Click off of there, and you get the idea. Actually, I probably should have put that this is a window on the top of it because it is a little bit harder to figure out what measurements go with what. So there's my window. You're going to do this for all of your measurements, and I'll show you what mine looks like once I get all of my measurements in. Okay, now I've finished putting all my dimensions into my picture. Notice I have both wall measurements, and I also have my 5 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All of my dimensions did not fit within my picture, and that's okay. I drew them on the outside, but notice that I labeled every single one of them. It's also important to put your room height on here because I'm going to need to scale down the height of my model when I go ahead and build it. So to build my model, which I'm now ready to do, I'm going to use all of my scale measurements to build it. So I'm going to start by building my outside walls. Notice that this wall has a length of 17.2 centimeters. So when I build this wall, it needs to be 17.2 centimeters long. This one needs to be 40.4 centimeters long, and so on and so forth. Same for my 5 items that I've put in my room, my couch, my coffee table. I need to follow all of my scale dimensions. Lastly, when you're finished, it's very important that you save what you have done. Now it's time to get your tools and get started building. Notice I have my computer so that I can look at what my scale measurements are supposed to be. I have my tape measure, again in metrics, because my measurements are all going to be in centimeters, and I'm using foam board for mine, only because I'm going to be using mine year after year. Yours, I would just recommend using cereal boxes or something inexpensive. You do not have to go out and buy foam board. Now I'm ready to get started. Now I've cut my first 2 pieces out. They're 13.7 centimeters high by 20.2 centimeters long. I went ahead and scaled down my room just a little bit more because it was going to be too big. So I'm going to continue cutting out the pieces of the room. Now that I have my 4 walls cut out, I drew an outline of my wall on the bottom so that I can situate my walls in a nice rectangular shape. After you've finished making your room, then you're going to start on making all 5 of your objects. After you're done making all of your items going into your room, you can go ahead and put them in there. And my scale model room is all finished.